In today's world, there are a lot of rules about what you can and can't do for a job. But in the past, people just said f it and did whatever they could for money. Some of these activities were either extremely dangerous or just really weird. But the people back then were either too stupid, poor or young to care. So here are some of the weirdest and worst jobs in history. Our first one was popular between the 15th and 18th century. Imagine you were a kid in school, and whenever your friend was a little shit in class, the teacher would beat you up instead. That would probably cause a few lawsuits now, but back then, that's exactly what happened to whipping boys. During that time, the king and his princess were seen at a higher status than most people. So in school, if the prince did something wrong, the teacher couldn't really punish him if he lacked his head connected to his body. So instead, the teacher would whip a friend of the prince as a punishment. They did this so that the prince would see his friend getting punished and stop misbehaving. And the whipping boys weren't just poor, desperate people. They were the sons of nobles who wanted to get close to the king so they could eventually get a higher status or kill the king in his sleep. Well, you got the whole test wrong, and I legally can't punish you, so where's your friend? Oh, he's right there. That guy? Didn't he bully you for the last 10 years? Yeah, but we're friends now. Okay then, well, I guess it's his lucky day. Our next one comes from 19th century Europe. At this time, bloodletting was a very popular form of treatment for basically every disease, and to do that, they needed a lot of leeches. Leeches would normally live in swamps and marshes, and so somebody had to go in there and collect them. These leech collectors would go into swamps with their legs exposed and let the leeches suck their blood, after which they'd pull them off and collect them. It was basically unprotected sex with Mother Nature, and you could get HIV from both. And just in case you didn't get a disease from the leech, the bite would keep bleeding for more than 10 hours, which is more than enough time for it to get infected. This job was normally done by poor peasants who were willing to risk death for money, and who probably had multiple diseases anyway. After a while, people realized that letting out blood wasn't gonna cure diseases, especially with their living conditions, and leech collecting eventually stopped. Now kings and queens in England had a lot of money, like a whole country's worth of money. So instead of doing everyday tasks, they just pay people to do it for them. Introducing the groom of the stool. This guy's only job was to take care of the king's hygiene whenever he went to the toilet. He would carry around the portable toilet wherever the king went. He'd supply towels and water to the king. And since toilet paper wasn't invented yet, you can probably guess what else he did. But surprisingly, wiping the king's ass was a great privilege at the time. The job paid very well, and the groom was one of the king's most trusted helpers. He was very close to the king's private parts and private matters, because while the wiping was happening, the king would tell the groom some royal secrets that no one else knew. The groom of the stool was one of the most powerful members in the palace, and even handled the kingdom's finances. We can only hope that he washed his hands first. Eventually, the position was discontinued in the 1900s when the king realized that there were better uses for his money than to pay someone to wipe his ass for him. Our next job was popular in the 18th and 19th century. As medical technology progressed, doctors needed more and more bodies to teach their students, which was pretty important considering they'd be working on live humans next. Enough people weren't giving up their dead bodies to the doctors, so they just decided to go into cemeteries and say, "Hey, do you mind if I steal your body and cut it up like some kind of f***ed up confetti?" I'll take that as a yes. And so, the profession of resurrectionist was born. These guys were hired by doctors to go in after funerals and just take the bodies there. At the time, words like human rights and consent didn't exist, so all those bodies 6 feet in the ground were basically free money. But they'd never steal any jewelry or valuables that were on the bodies though, because that would be illegal, and they wouldn't do anything illegal of course. At the time, stealing things from the body was a crime, but stealing the body itself wasn't, so they'd carefully take only the body, cover the grave back up, and pretend nothing ever happened. Sometimes, the cemeteries would run out of bodies to steal, so some innovative resurrectionists just made their own dead people. Eventually, a law was passed making stealing bodies illegal, and people stopped doing it. Speaking of dead people, have you ever went to a funeral and said, "Wow, this is really f***ing boring. Cheer up guys, why is everyone so depressed?" Well, if you did, what is wrong with you? And also, you're not alone. The ancient Romans thought the same thing too. So at some funerals, they would hire funeral clowns called archimimus to lighten up the mood and cheer everyone up. "Hey everyone, why the long face? It's like someone died in here." The clown would wear a mask of the dead guy's face and imitate his voice and movements. He would then proceed to roast the shit out of the dead guy and everyone else at the funeral. What did this guy say to his son when he left for college? What did he say? Nothing, cause he's dead. Tough crowd, huh? After a while, people realized that making fun of people at a funeral was kinda like giving a haircut to a cancer patient, and the job eventually faded out of existence. Our last job was popular in Europe in the 1700s. Due to the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people moved to cities and a lot of homes with chimneys were built. As people used those chimneys, ash and soot collected in them and someone had to clean them, otherwise it could catch on fire. But the chimneys were too narrow for adults to fit in it. Hey kid, you wanna help us out? Yeah, sure. Good. Have fun down there. Children started being used to clean these chimneys because they were small enough to fit through the holes, which were about as big as an A4 sheet of paper. Some of these kids were as young as 4 years old, and they were breathing in toxic ash from fireplaces, which gave them lung diseases. And just as an extra fuck you, they also got cancer. The kids would also get stuck in the chimneys, and sometimes just died there. People would occasionally also light the fireplace with the kids still inside the chimney, just in case they weren't suffering enough. These kids would sign a contract with an adult chimney cleaner, basically saying that they were going to keep sweeping chimneys until they were too big to fit in them. Which is obviously the type of contract a 6-year-old should be signing. You might be wondering how these people found these children. Well, people would go to poor families and say, okay, we're gonna steal your child for like 10 years and make him suffer and possibly give him cancer. We'll give you $200 for it. Sound good? And the parents accepted. It was a great deal for the parents because they were gonna have food for the next year and God knows they have too many children. It's a win-win overall. Except for the kid. Eventually, laws were passed that banned the use of children in chimney sweeping and people started using machines instead, probably because they died less often. So yeah, those were some of the weirdest and worst jobs that ever existed in history. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and check out some other videos in the description. I'll see you guys later.